We are ready.
I am recording right now. We've got quite a nice tribute and want everybody to feel part of the community.
So far, 180 households checking in.
People are slowly coming in.
Wow, this is amazing. People from literally all over the world popping it up on our screens now.
Awesome. If you are not showing your camera, please do. We've got all sorts of cool stuff. We're going to take a group photo later.
Oh man, this is so cool. Looks like Amsterdam checking in.
At the end of the tribute, there's going to be a champagne toast. You might seriously think about opening the champagne now. If you're anything like me, opening champagne is a high-stress endeavor.
Oh, you guys, Sam would be so happy with all these people showing up for him.
It's great to see so many people here to celebrate our friend Sam.
Ready to mute almost 200 attendees, Eddie. Stand by, ready to go in 5? We are ready in 3. Stand by for opening roll. Welcome all of you people. What an incredible gathering that we have here today for our friend Sam Dan Kent. And we're going to spend a few seconds right now taking a look at his face before we start our commentary and thoughts and remembrances.
This is George Kent. George is Sam's older brother. He is the host for today, and we would like to start off by turning the camera over to George Kent.
Thank you all for being here to Sam's party. You know, as the older brother, I had no problems sneaking food off my 5-year-old brother's plate, whether it was a pickle, a potato chip, or a piece of chicken. So I popped a French fry in my mouth and began to chew, and he looked at me and he said, "I already sucked on that one." Yes, that was the earliest Sam one-liner that I can remember, and that ended my food thievery career. There was also my mother struggling to teach Sam how to best sweep a floor. After several failed attempts, she just grabbed the broom and said, "I'll just do it myself." Well, he nodded and winked at me as he left the room because he had begun to perfect his technique of selective ineptitude to avoid unwanted work. As the elder, it was my duty to teach Sam the fine art of self-defense. So we donned a set of boxing gloves, and I planned on showing him my techniques. I threw the first punch. It barely touched him, but he threw himself on the floor, rolled to his back, judged himself knocked out by slapping the floor to the count of 10, got up, removed the boxing gloves, handed them to me, and left the room. Conflict resolution, Sam style. I was out of the country, and Sam was with a young lady, touring my family's home, looking at the family portraits, and she saw mine. She said, "You know, he's kind of cute." Sam said, "Yeah. Too bad he's only 4'8", and continued to walk down the hall. Sibling rivalry, score another point for Sam. 2 years ago, Louise and I took Sam to Disneyland. We spent 2 days looking at every site, riding every ride. But Sam kept looking for attractions that he had remembered from 50 years earlier. That's when he had run away from home, driving himself to Disneyland with the family 1957 Chevy. Incidentally, he abandoned that car in the desert of Arizona. He had forgotten to put oil in the car. Anyway, I digress. After we had been through the park twice, he kept saying, "That's bizarre. I don't see things that I'm looking for." Sam, every obstinate and ever stubborn. So this last year, this fella who had lost his driving privileges, 2 accidents in 1 day, could no longer read with comprehension, had difficulty either remembering names or words, took himself from Boulder to Denver, from Denver to Los Angeles, Los Angeles to Anaheim, Anaheim to Disneyland, and back again. When I spoke with him, the only thing he said was, "That's bizarre. I can't believe they don't have the stuff I was looking for." Ever stubborn, ever obstinate. My brother Sam, the worst businessman I ever knew, but possessed the cleverest and the quickest of minds. Had no problem telling other people, especially bosses, what they should be doing, but was the most patient of listeners if there is a friend with a problem. Always dreaming about the next great project, whether it be a magic restaurant, a railroad layout, or a big theatrical production. If only somebody else would please front the money. A consummate entertainer, whether it was a radio disc jockey, an actor, a street performer, a magician, or hosting a movie night with a fancy dinner. Sam was always the entertainer. He was also the collector of autographed first editions, movie posters, classical music, but also monster figures, Disney paraphernalia, and Bowie knives. Sam, the man who knew everybody, but chose only the best as his closest friends. He was the quintessential Peter Pan. He drove me to exasperation, but could make me laugh like no other human being. As I put my brother's life into perspective, I conclude that his was a great success, for I measure it using Ralph Waldo Emerson's definition of success. To laugh often, to love much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This, said Emerson, is to have succeeded. And this was Sam. When I was frustrated with him, I would look and think, why can't he be more like me? Now looking back, I say, why could I have not been more like my brother?
Oh man, I love this guy, George Kent. One of the great things about actually having this experience for Sam was the whole notion of being able to spend some time with this lovely, lovely man who is a wicked table tennis player. And he was 5 years old and 10 months when his baby brother came along. His life was very peaceful up until then. And then what? In came this kid. And what a life they've had. And he's been so gracious, he and his wife, Louise, through all of those years, not only with Sam, but then later in his life here in Boulder, Colorado with Sam, right to the very end, Louise and George were right there. And I'm just so glad and thankful to you guys for having materialized not only this event in Sam's name, but also the champagne that we have all received, or money to buy such, all directed by Sam, but you made it work, Kent. And so thank you so much for all of that.
We're all here together right now at the same time. I see 153 different Zoom screens on, which means there's probably 175 to 200 people, all of whom love Sam. And we want to do a number of things today to make us all feel like a community. So I will start out by telling about the very first time I met Sam. I remember it distinctly. Someone told me there was a new magic shop in Boulder, Wizard Magic Shop. I said, I'm going to go look for it. I pull up to a strip mall and I see nothing. I see a hardware store. I see a couple of other things. And some guy sort of like standing out in the parking lot. So I hopped out of my car. I asked him, do you know where the Wizard Magic Shop is? He said he did. He said, follow me. So I followed him. He went up the stairs. And when he got to the top of the stairs, spun around and went, can I help you? It was so typical of Sam. But I didn't know it at the time. But it sticks in my mind because it was such a Sam thing to do. I also remember the last time that I saw Sam. For the past year or two, it was very odd because it was like losing my friend Sam in slow motion. And so earlier this year, I decided that I wanted to get together with Sam and tell him some stuff while he was still able to remember what I said. So at the beginning of February, I took him out to lunch. And when we got back to his house, we went into his kitchen, and I'll never forget this. I said, Sam, we both know that soon enough, you're not going to remember me, but I will always remember you. I told him what an important part of my life he was for 47 years. And we reminisced about a lot of things. We talked about that first time I met him at the in front of Hobby Specialties. I told him that I loved him. And we gave each other like a really nice hug. And it wasn't like the typical, the man hug. There was a lot of affection in that hug. And I remember wondering at the time, what must be going on in Sam's head as I was saying all of this stuff to him. It was just very odd. So we lingered a little bit more, and then I left. And that night, when I got home, I wrote in my journal that I had said goodbye to my friend Sam Kent today. But I didn't think I was being literal. I thought I was just being figurative. I certainly assumed that I'd be seeing Sam plenty, but it was still a goodbye of sorts. And then 3 days later, he was gone. And when you play things back in your mind, it's interesting because as I played back that last time I saw Sam with the new understanding of what was going on, knowing what I know now, knowing what he knew at the time, it really makes me wonder what was going on in Sam's mind when I was saying all those goodbyes to him. All I can say is I'm glad I got the chance to do it for me and for Sam. Michael?
Oh boy. Thank you so much, Eddie, for those thoughts. For me, it was back in 1970. That's when it started. I had just transferred to the University of Colorado to study communications and take a job at KBOL radio here in Boulder. I had just arrived in Colorado, kind of a wide-eyed, curious kid, loving every minute of this new home, this Boulder. And I was at the radio station, and on the other side of the studio glass was an FM radio station. So I worked on the AM side, and there was an FM side, and there was a partition of glass, and they played mostly classical music, except overnight they played a bunch of cheesy elevator music, and they called it easy listening. Only strange people worked over on the FM side for sure. Long hairs, pocket protectors, and there was even a guy in a turtleneck who wore his pants too high. Guess who was over there spinning Chopin and Rachmaninoff and came over to welcome me? Hello, he'd say in his Sam way. Oh my God, we talked music and space and magic, and we went for cheeseburgers and endless movies. Who was this coolest of cats that came into my life? Oh my God, this guy had spent 363 days in friggin' Vietnam. And here I was, my young self. My life was in the hands of Richard Nixon at that point. And I had always wondered, by the way, and I never asked him about this until later on I got to really know this guy, but I always wondered how he ever took orders in the military. George, maybe you can help me with that a little bit later on if you have any insight on that. Sam Dan Kent was so interesting, and I am so attracted to interesting people. And a bonus, by the way, is that he came with really interesting friends that, of course, I immediately co-opted. Probably some of you are very much a part of that. So we tailed each other in various ways over the years. I took over the biggest bicycle race in America, and Sam loved retail. So I had him run our cool little bike race store. And then he became a roommate. That's where I discovered a major secret about Sam Kent. And he's not here to stop me. So I'm just going to tell you this little secret. Seriously, please promise not to tell anyone. Sam Kent ironed his underwear. It's true. He ran the Boulder Theater. And I got to sit in the balcony and watch classical films with my lovely friend Laurel, who we're going to meet here in just a few minutes. He moved to Knoxville and worked at the World's Fair as a puppeteer. I got to see that. But then it was around that time that I lost all hope for Sam Kent. Or should I say gained admiration for the fact that he was not normal and that he would never have a pedestrian, normal lifestyle or a job. Every month or so, I would take my very, very special friends to his uber immaculate Pee-wee playhouse of a home in Boulder, Colorado. It's in Longmont, just outside of Boulder. And I'd never tell these people where I was taking them or what they would see when they got there or who they would meet. They just walked in that place, and from the doorbell on, they were in this land of wonderment, enchantment. And I wish every one of you could have gone there to see this incredible place of Sam's. Displays of wacky things, a waist-high Dreamliner Disney rocket, a Titanic model with little windows that would light up. You'd go in there and he'd flick them on and say, that's cabin number 636, and so was in there. There was a Jim Bowie knife, random, and a signed book from Ray Bradbury, and a common household item that we all have, of course, in our houses, an Egyptian mummy sarcophagus. By the way, all the books had plastic dust covers. Okay, I told you he ironed his underwear. That kind of just goes along with that. There was a scale, a Nautilus model, and Pepsi bottles that went from giant to tiny. And I'd take my guests in there, and when they thought they saw everything, they'd go down these stairs into a full-out working movie theater, folks, replete with a concession stand stocked with jujubes and chuckles and
But no
raisinets.
popcorn.
And I'm getting to the no popcorn Goldstein. Leather, fat chairs, and a curtain he'd slide open and reveal this real movie screen. Surrounding on the walls were these sci-fi all these posters. Hopefully we'll get to hear a little bit more about that later from Evan and Kelly. Over there was a 12-foot behemoth Gort robot from the day the Earth stood still. And of course, he had state-of-the-art projection equipment. He worked at a high-end entertainment store in Boulder. They ostensibly hired this guy because he came in there so often as a customer, they just put him to work. There were no rules, as you said, no greasy popcorn allowed, but he did have fake foam spilled popcorn, or popcorn, as he said, and no phones. You choose your film and settle in. That was it. I took so many people there. I took Jane Goodall's grandkids there on visits from Africa, and we even screened an early draft of a film that would go on to be nominated for an Oscar. My favorite part of this whole thing, however, was the drive home with my friends and listen to them either talking amongst themselves or to me from the back seat. Who gets to live like that, they would say, or who has a house like that? This was a common one. How old is that guy? And one person said, well, I think he's like 25 or something. For me, it was a ploy taking people there for these special guests of mine to step into this Samosphere and experience this guy and see that there are other ways to walk through life, something that I, gelled with him on. He made a very lasting impression. To say that Sam was his own guy is just a silly understatement. There's a reason why we're all here today. What was it? His glimmer, his odd path or disjointed sense of any form of reality? Was it, I just love seeing him every time, showing him off, being his friend, meeting his brother, seeing him iron his underwear and nary a thing out of place in his bedroom. And he's the only Sam I ever met whose actually his name is just Sam. It was short, of course, for Sam. That was his name. So today, Eddie and I sat with George and Louise, and we struggled so hard to try to figure out how to encapsulate this guy in just a few minutes. So we're going to take an hour now, and just good luck if we even come close to a fraction of what this guy was all about. He was pretty complicated, as George just alluded to it. There was the Sam on the outside who we knew well, but there was also the other parts that worried over self-worth and contribution. And yet he kept pursuing his dreams, as George said, and that he did. And we were all well aware of those. Last month was my 50-year anniversary of meeting Sam. Eddie had his 47th. Not long ago, I arrived at his door and I had to reintroduce myself. I'm Michael Eisner, I said. He cocked his head and with a furrowed brow, he said, hello. And he opened the door and I walked in. I love that I can be here with all of you today to honor him. He is honorable. And I love him. Eddie?
Thank you, Michael. What Michael did not say is that now Michael irons his underwear. That's the tribute to, just to show you what a big tribute to Sam that is. We have lots of friends of Sam. One of the oldest friends that we know of Sam's is Larry Crowley. Larry Crowley met Sam in 1964. That's 56 years ago, more than a half of a century ago. They met at the University of Colorado Theater Department. Larry is also a professional magician, as was Sam. Larry, tell us some stuff that you remember about our friend Sam.
Absolutely. And by the way, I do iron my socks as a result of knowing Sam. Taught me life lessons, a lot of life lessons. I'm an educator, a teacher, but teachers make the best students sometimes. And here's some of the stuff I learned from Sam. First, there was the magic. He was my original magic mentor, and I can say with certainty, had it not been for Sam, I wouldn't have become a magician. Secondly, he taught me to strive for quality in my life. Everything Sam did, from his never-ending quest to make the perfect loaf of French bread, to running his businesses, to transforming his homes into showpieces, to his incomparable wit, and hosting the best parties I ever attended. Sam was a master. Third, Sam showed me how important friends are in life. He attracted friends and strived to maintain those connections over the years. And although he remained private and reserved, he loved us. We loved him. Somehow we always felt better after being with him. Lastly, Sam taught me about courage. All his life, he fought with self-doubt. When he finally realized the bleakness of his future, he tried to seek professional help. But he ended up incarcerated, bewildered, and frightened. Despite the support of friends and family, Sam could not depend on any of us for the help he really wanted. Sensing what was happening to him, he was able to plan his death alone and with diminishing mental abilities, and to do so with dignity, consideration for his family and friends, and touching forethought as to the details of wrapping up his life, details that must have taxed his innermost resources. In short, Sam was my friend in the deepest sense, and I miss him every day.
Larry, we have so many friends of Sam who are joining us here today. And, when Eddie and I and George and Louise were sitting around thinking about what this whole program might look like, we were trying to figure out who it is that should be here to help tell the Sam story. And voila, manna from heaven fell in our lap in the form of a video taken by a lovely lady named Joyce Gordon. They have the Maria Rogers Oral History Program at the Carnegie Library of the Boulder Public Library. And unbeknownst to any of us, including his brother, Sam had sat down and spent some time with Joyce Gordon and her camera. And it was posted as part of the Oral History Program here in Boulder, Colorado. I got that 2 hours and we buckled that down into 12 minutes. And the person who's going to be telling the story about Sam will be Sam. Joyce Gordon, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And I just got to ask you, in all of your search of things that you were looking for and all the oral history buffs and experts in this town, you found Sam Kent. Tell us about that. How?
I began the oral history program in 2004. But I was working at the video station, which was kind of a big deal. It was an independently owned video store in Boulder that had over 50,000 titles. And Sam was also working there for a brief time. I think we overlapped, but he would continue to come in there, and we made the connection that he was Sam of the Wizard Magic Shop, where I had brought my 3-year-old in to get fake poop and invisible ink and other coveted items. And I heard part of his story, and I knew I wanted to interview him.
Right.
He had been in Boulder since about 1959, so he had seen so many changes. And the interview just unraveled so seamlessly because I would ask him a question and he would talk for 10 or 15 minutes about all the things he had done. And he was so inspiring to me because he was not fearful of change, and he did so many different things. He was a magnet for opportunity, and he just told his story with humor and giving this whole historical background of Boulder. And one thing that really has stuck with me all this time is he was talking about he got the opportunity to work for a classical music station as a DJ in Denver, and that he said he wasn't really that good at it because he kept trying to imitate his mentor. And so the quote he left me with was, "You got to be yourself on the radio, just like any place else."
Yeah.
And the other thing about Sam is long time Boulderite, and he had the courage and the interest in moving to Longmont, to this cool neighborhood that was just kind of coming together, and never tired of doing new things. So I also want to say that whenever I do these Zoom meetings, I'm always afraid of how my hair is going to look. And during my interview with Sam, he was talking about a time when he allowed his hair to grow long, and he said, but I looked like an exploded Brillo pad. And he said to me, "I'm sure you can relate to that." So Sam, humor, bravery, what an incredible storyteller. And you can all watch the entire interview on the library's oral history site. So,
Joyce, thank you so much for just letting us have this. You have provided us, all of us, and Sam Kent with the world's greatest gift, and that is Sam Kent.
You know why they call it Dex, don't you? It's because they forgot to copyright the name Yellow Pages. Isn't that great? All right. Okay, it's been a little while, so we'll just... Two phone books for the price of one.
That's impossible.
It is.
How do you do that?
Muscles, its own muscles.
Today, January 7th, 2009, I'm talking with Sam Kent, a resident of Boulder since 1957, magician, DJ, and so much more.
All retired, by the way. Born in Chicago, July 1946. That would be making me a baby boomer, I guess. Mm-hmm. And lived there, Chicago, and Oak Park, Illinois, home of Ernest Hemingway and Frank Lloyd Wright, until I was 11, and then we moved here to Boulder.
Did you think it was pretty cool to live so close to the drive-in?
Oh yeah. We could go to my brother's room and look around the corner of his window and actually see the screen. And we always had this plan that we would run a wire all the way to one of the speakers, about 500 yards away, so we could hear and not just watch the movie. But we never did that. I remember going in the Volkswagen that I had to drive, and I was one of the few guys who would actually go to the drive-in theater to see the movie. And I'm proud of that. Maybe. So yeah, Uni Hill, then I went to Baseline, which was fairly new at that time. That was, the cool kids went to Baseline and the hoods went to Casey. You could tell because they wore darker clothes. But they had better looking girls, so it was a wash, So my first little scooter was a Vespa, and then I got a Ducati, which was pretty cool. And I had that for a year or two until I turned 16, and then my mother went ballistic and gave me a car because she didn't want me on a motorcycle. And I remember I did wear sport coats. Not too many kids in junior high wore sport coats, but I did on my little motor scooter. Didn't have a helmet, of course. Amazing that we survived. But I had that until I was 16. And then I drove our little 59 Volkswagen Bug, and on the side of it was a little logo about this big that said Kent's Kettle. And that was the name of our little restaurant, coffee shop. My folks up in the hill on College had a coffee shop. They left the house at 5:30 in the morning and worked till about 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Whew. Yeah, and I worked there. I was 12, and I worked there. I'd go in and take a couple of orders, and then I would sit down and eat breakfast. It was hard. They paid me 60 cents an hour. I remember I would just eat a huge amount of food. I mean, I'd have an omelet with potatoes and toast, and then I'd have milkshake, for dessert, and then maybe I'd have some tea or some more milk and maybe some more food. Donuts. My dad made great donuts.
Kent's kettle lasted about 3 years.
About 3 years, and then they sold it to a fellow named Lou, and he sold it to another Greek, we're Greek, named Chris, and it was Chris's kettle for quite a long time. They got with some folks who wanted to open a bowling alley in Boulder, and they wanted my dad to be a part investor and to run the restaurant. These three folks built what was known as Thunderbird bowling lanes. Actually, they let me start to cook there. Nobody died, so that was good. And it was fun having a bowling alley, We'd go in and bowl for free, and I had an average of well over 100. By then I was about 15, 16. This is my father, Dan Kent, and he just finished bowling the first perfect game in Boulder's history, perfect 300. Every time after about the 5th or 6th strike, the rest of the bowling alley started getting quiet. And by the 10th frame, completely quiet. Everybody came over and watched him, and he was left-handed, and every one of his balls was just perfect except one. One crossed over to the other side, and everybody went, oh, and then it was a strike. So it was very cool. So I did comedy. I guess that's a matter of opinion. But what happened was there was a performer, a comedian named Shelley Berman, and he was a very big influence on my life, along with Jonathan Winters, as far as comedians go. And I just heard one of his routines so many times I had it memorized. So I put on a suit like he wore, got a stool, I was in the 8th grade, and sat on it and I stole one of his routines. I did pretty well. Stage fright was never really an issue for me, except when I didn't memorize my lines. I did plays for a while, and I was terrible because I never memorized my lines. So I spent all of my energy on stage trying to remember my lines instead of actually being the character. So I stopped doing that when I started performing other things, and other things besides acting, producing, directing, mostly magic shows. Yeah, magic shows were great because I didn't have to memorize any lines. It was very nice. Yeah, we went to movies Friday and Saturday night. Now I never had a girlfriend in high school, but so I'd go to movies, Friday night movies at the Boulder Theater, and see double feature Vincent Price movies, and that was great fun. We had guys in high school who had some pretty cool cars, and they would drag the cars. I don't even remember where. I guess 28th Street, maybe Pearl Street. Yeah, and that was fun. I didn't do that because I didn't have, I had a Volkswagen Bug. In high school, my senior year, they needed a drummer for the pep band, and because I wasn't in the marching band, normally they wouldn't let you do that, but they needed a drummer. So I brought not just my little snare drum, but my entire set of Ludwig drums to the football games and the basketball games and played. And then somebody else who had the right to be in the band wanted to do that. And I was very upset. But he brought his entire set of drums, so it was like, the Who or the Rolling Stones. We had 2 sets of drums playing with the pep band. It was great. So here I was, my last semester. I could take whatever I wanted. So I took Chinese literature and, I don't know, a home ec or something like that. And I went to him and I said, Jim, I need 3 more hours. Can I take an independent study with you? And he said, sure, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. He said, how about Charlie Chaplin? I said, that sounds good. So every Wednesday for that semester, they would send over a projector, 16 millimeter projector, and Chaplin films, what they had, which was about 20, I would say, of his shorts, and then 4 or 5 of his features. And chronologically, I watched all the Chaplin. At the end of the semester, he said, so what did you learn? I said, Chaplin was great. He said, you get an A. And the funny thing is, I learned more from that class than I did from almost any other class at CU. And this was in '74, and opened the Wizard Magic Shop. And so I had my shop there for 5 years. And during that time, the mall was created. So I was the first performer on the mall. The day we officially opened, it was in July of '76, somebody said, why don't you do some magic tricks? So I went out on the 1100 block by my store and did something, I don't know. And once again, I just threw things out there, and they thought it was a show. But it felt exciting to be there, and I'm glad I was part of it. One of my employees, Lamont Ream, was an escape artist. And I said, Lamont, why don't you do something? So we hired a crane. Actually, they came and did it for free. And we hoisted him up 50 feet in the air by his ankles while he was wearing a straitjacket. It was right in front of the store. And there were, I don't know how many people, I'll say 1,000 people. I actually had to close off Pearl Street and part of Broadway for a while, because everybody came to watch this guy. And it was very exciting to watch him do this legitimate escape in front of all these people. My friend Brent Warren and I put together an act called Dr. Chuckle and Mr. Hype. And he built all this incredible equipment, and things, boxes and cages and all kinds of stuff. And I did little tricks with cards. I don't like to carry around heavy material, but we worked for one summer. It was fun. It was real fun, but it was a lot of work for him, and so we didn't do it again. When I had my shop, I used to sell something called flash paper, which is just very thin paper, chemically treated, that if you touched it to a match, it went poof. It's great stuff, especially if you're 12. And actually any age, it's great stuff. Well, somebody saw some of this stuff at some concert and said, where did you get it? And I said, oh, the Wizard. So the fire department came and told me I had to stop selling this stuff because it was a fire hazard. And every magic shop in the world sells flash paper. So I went to Janet Roberts, who was on the city council then, and I knew her a little bit, and I said, what can we do about this? She said, well, come to the council and do a demo or something. So I went to the council and I brought this flash paper, and you put it in your hand and wad it up and like that, and just doesn't burn you. Well, I told them it doesn't burn you. The fact is, it did burn me, but nothing serious. And they were very incredulous, but they passed a special ordinance that in Boulder you can now sell flash paper. And that was one of my great contributions to the city of Boulder, I believe. I was the first DJ on that station, 6 a.m., KBVL. The very first day, I was 15 minutes late to work. It is amazing. But then on the other hand, they only paid me $2.50 an hour, so it was all right, And if you stand in that exit door, facing the other exit door across the theater, there is this amazing echo chamber. So if you do, like that, it will. I love it. But I'm not one of those people who just longs for the old days. I mean, the only thing I would long for is, to be 11 again.
But Sam, you never stop being 11. Oh, I love spending those few minutes with him. I could watch that. I have watched that, by the way, 1,000 times, and it doesn't matter. I could just keep watching it and watching it and watching it. Sam had so many dear friends, and we are about to meet two of the most interesting and loyal ones in his life. Kelly Zweifel was the office manager for our Coors Bicycle Classic, and with her came a bonus husband you don't often get, a truly delightful, really smart, and just genuine human being. Their son Spencer's music was on a little bit earlier in this tribute cast. What a world-class talent he is, and too a friend of Sam's. Kelly and Evan live north of here in Fort Collins, and would think nothing of getting in their car and driving 2 hours to and fro to just have dinner with Sam right to the very end. They were part of a movie claque that used Oscars and other things as an excuse to get together, and we'll hear about some of that stuff right now from them. I welcome these dear friends, Kelly and Evan Zweifel. They're up in Fort Collins, Colorado.
All right, our thoughts about Sam. When Evan and I first met Sam Kent nearly 30 years ago, he was living in a one-bedroom apartment on the hill in Boulder. I don't remember much about that apartment except that it was owned by his dad. It was meticulously clean, and there were framed movie posters on the walls. In the kitchen, there was a one sheet for Lawrence of Arabia, which he would insist that you see on the big screen. In the living room, I think there were 4 horror posters, all identically framed and perfectly aligned. The horror posters were for the 1950s Hammer Film Productions color remake of the classic Universal Studio horror movies from the 1930s. Sam liked pretty much all film, but he had a particular penchant for horror. If you were willing to listen, he would tell you where he was when he first saw his favorites. He would tell you which actor played which monster in which movie, and he would tell you which ones were actually worth watching. I believe he owned all of his favorites first on VHS, and then later on DVD, and then even later on Blu-ray. He would willingly loan you his copy, and he would screen one for you pretty much anytime. It wasn't long before Sam opened a movie poster shop inside the Mile High Comic Store in Thornton, figuring that surely there must be many like-minded movie memorabilia enthusiasts. It was decorated Sam Kent style, including a 4-foot by 8-foot Egyptian sarcophagus, custom built with drawers to hold and display inventory. After the store closed, he had the sarcophagus repurposed into an enormous dining room table. Evan and I moved to Fort Collins in 1997, but we never lost touch with Sam. He came regularly for Easter and Thanksgiving, usually bringing one of his signature desserts, accompanied with single-serving Haagen-Dazs ice cream cups, which we ate with the little plastic spoons built into the lid. We also met annually with some other friends, John, Lisa, Laurel, Grant, Ward, James, and Julie, for a progressive comedy film festival. The festival spanned 3 to 5 days, and each night was at a different home, with the host providing dinner and choosing the preferably obscure comedy movie. Sam believed that for ideal home movie viewing, the TV should be as large as possible, the room should be completely dark, and there should be no talking. He didn't need a fancy house, but he did need a giant TV and a large leather couch. When he moved to Prospect in Longmont, he built his movie theater in the basement, complete with memorabilia from his favorite films on the walls, stadium seating, his 10-foot gourd, and a fully stocked candy counter. He was the ideal host for the final night of our comedy festival. Dinner was unpredictable and might be tofu hot dogs with Haagen-Dazs single-service ice cream cups, or a multi-course home-cooked gourmet meal served around the sarcophagus table. The conversation was fascinating because Sam was passionate about so many things: film, magic, Gene Fowler first editions, Joe Morello drum skills, model trains, politics. There was the inevitable battle between Sam and his gigantic and very complicated remote control, followed by the showing of a special short, often Charlie Chaplin, and a break to stock up on snacks for the main feature. The feature was rarely a comedy. To Sam, the festival rules were really just suggestions. So the film was usually one of his favorites. An underappreciated classic, something we hadn't seen in years. Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, the one with the whales. 20,000 Leagues Out of the Sea, the 1954 version with Kirk Douglas and James Mason. The Horror of Dracula, 1958 with Christopher Lee. Or 2001: A Space Odyssey. Whatever the film, it was always the best experience, being together in the dark, in Sam's theater, watching one of the many movies he loved. And that's the way we will remember Sam, living his life by his rules and always doing and sharing things he was passionate about. Thanks.
Well, thank you there, guys. That was very nice, very nice. I also have to say it was great seeing that video of Sam because, you know, as soon as you hear his voice, as soon as you see that smile, it comes right back to you. So that was, the video and the stories are all great.
Yes,
there are a lot of family here today in this little tribute. Sam has 2 nieces, Holly and Nicole, and one of them would like to do a little tribute to her Uncle Sam.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Braun. George Kent is my father, and Sam was my uncle. Growing up, it was so fun to have my very own Uncle Sam. He was the coolest uncle any kid could ever have, and none of my friends had an uncle like him. Everything with Sam was fun. As a child, I couldn't wait to go visit my Uncle Sam. His house was not like any other grown-ups that I knew. He had a Mickey Mouse phone, he had a Coke bottle collection, and other cool toys to look at. You never knew what you would find there. Anything from fake spilled milk to chattering teeth to a stuffed animal looking like a frog. I'd go visit him at the magic store, and we would walk down Pearl Street, and he would point out each of the street performers by name and tell me about them. I was amazed that he knew all of these cool people. And in the evenings, we would all gather together after dinner, my parents, my grandparents, Dan and Jewel, and he would do some magic just for me. He would do a trick, and afterwards I'd say, "How'd he do that?" And like every good magician, he would say, "It's magic." And one evening when I bothered him so much with saying, "How did he do that?" my grandfather said, "It's all done with smoke and mirrors." Little did they know that for months afterwards I'd be wondering where the smoke was and where the mirror was in that trick. The fondness of my uncle was exemplified when I was pregnant with my firstborn and chose to name him Sam. Uncle Sam was named after his Uncle Sam, who lost his life in World War II. The interesting thing is the trilogy of Sams all served in the military. I'm 50 years old, and Sam and I never lived in the same state. Our connections was through visits, great typed letters, and phone calls. When I called Sam and he wasn't home, it was the best. I so enjoyed getting those awesome answering machine messages, and I can't be the only one that called back for a second time just to hear the message again. Most of my visits with Sam were in Boulder, but in 1982, Sam worked in Knoxville, Tennessee at the World's Fair. And the most memorable part of that visit was sleeping on his couch, and his pet tarantula was right on the table next to me all night long. I did appreciate when he moved to feeding squirrels instead of feeding spiders much better. As a teenager, Sam and I shared a love of good food, and we enjoyed cooking together. I'll never forget this one fettuccine Alfredo dish that we had on his apartment in 7th Street. It was great. We shared a love of Mexican food, and he taught me the joy of the perfect chile relleno. Our in-person visits over the years were limited, but they were cherished. We shared a love of Estes Park, and as an adult, no visit would be complete without a hike in Rocky Mountain National Park. We would walk and talk effortlessly, and those conversations will be treasured. We'd finish the hike with some Mexican food and a big hug and a smile. Now, I started off saying that everything was fun with Sam. I will say, in the last couple of visits, things weren't quite as fun. It was painful to see how much of my beloved uncle had gone. But at the end of that last visit, I got a hug and one of those Sam smiles.
Thank you, Nicole. Sam has probably on the tribute today, I would say 15 cousins at least from all over, but there's a lot of them from Chicago because that's where Sam is from. And we have one of those women right now, Pam Geekin, who is going to represent Sam's cousins. So Pam, tell us a little bit about your cousin, Sam.
I'm Pam, and I'm one of Sam's many Greek cousins. And I'd like to share with you all today one of my favorite family memories, which has everything to do with Sam. And it happened when I was a kid, and Sam was actually a teenager. So just some quick family background. My mom and Sam's mom were sisters, but they came from a really large family of 6 kids. And the family basically stayed and lived in the Chicago area and then in nearby suburbs like Oak Park. But then, in the late 1950s, Sam and his family made the bold decision to move to Boulder, Colorado, and we were all astonished here in Chicago. And it was really exciting news for the Kents, but it's pretty sad for us. But a few years later, I personally got a great consolation prize because my parents sent my brother and I on the trip of a lifetime. They put us, and I think I was 10 at the time, on an overnight train to Boulder, and it was just fabulous. In fact, when I got to Boulder, I didn't really want to get off the train because I had my own room. I had a little pull-out bed. But I did get off that train because I knew that Sam was waiting for me. Sometimes with my cousins in Chicago, almost all who were all boys and a little older, I didn't always feel part of the crowd. I have to say, though, with Sam, I always felt such a special bond. And on that first trip to Colorado, he gave me so much time and attention. I mean, I was a 10-year-old kid. I had never seen the mountains before. And the very first day that I was there, Sam took me up to the mountains. I mean, it was extraordinary. A little bit later in the visit, I had never been to a play. I had never seen live theater. So, of course, Sam took me to the theater, an evening performance. He said he wasn't interested in a matinee. So we had an evening performance, and then after that, a late night dinner. I mean, I was in heaven. But, you know, even though I had all these great experiences, and I don't think this is going to surprise anybody, one of the things that I remember so vividly was Sammy's room, you know, when he was like 16 or 17. You know, he had these magic boxes and magic balls. You know, he had comic books and scary books and strange statues. He had little model cars. And now I know in retrospect what I was really seeing. I was seeing the beginning of his collection. So I am really proud that I was there really to see that. And it was great about all the things, but there also just was the way he was with me. You know, really when I think about it, he never said, Pammy, don't touch this or don't touch that. He was just so generous. And he also said, and when I'm gone, Pam, you know, you can be in my room. So wow, what a gift. So think about this. I'm in Colorado. I've got mountains outside. Down the street, some of the relatives, not relatives, actually friends, had horses. So you could ride horses, so mountains, horses. But I chose to spend a real lot of my time in Sammy's room because it was like my own personal amusement park. It was like a fun house rolled into one. And then, you know, and sometimes towards the end of the day, Sam would come in and he would sit down and he would work some magic with me, just the two of us. Now, what could be better than that? Many, many years later, probably about 4 years, I was directing the marketing of a large residential community in the Midwest, okay? And the town's history was closely tied to the railroad industry. And we decided to do a marketing campaign with a railroad theme. But everything we were doing was, I could see it was boring, it was uninspired, and I was getting really frustrated. So I decided to call Sam. And even though we hadn't seen each other at that point, I think in quite a while, we had a great talk, and Sam said he was willing to help me. So I was excited. And you know, as I recall, I thought I was going to get kind of a small like train display or a display about trains. And instead, Sam hand-built a model train display that was about the size of half of our whole sales office. I mean, and then he somehow drove it all the way out from Boulder to us in the Midwest, and he brought a couple of bottles of champagne. And I mean, it was extraordinary. I had been expecting maybe a locomotive or a car or two, but he had all that and more. And he also built a miniature train station, and then he carefully replicated all the buildings and local attractions that were right near the station. I mean, it was beautifully and professionally rendered. And really, I can't even imagine how long it took him to do. I think I was embarrassed to ask him at the time. But anyway, I remember standing there at our grand opening, and I was watching parents and kids, and they were all crowding around, just really marveling at Sam's creation. And they were watching the train whiz by. And, you know, I thought to myself, who else has a cousin that can do something like this? And I also remember just being so happy that Sam was with me there and still working his magic, really, for all of us.
There are all sorts of perspectives that we're getting today. The Wizard Magic Shop, which was the best magic shop I have ever been in anywhere in the United States, was one of the things that really made Sam famous in Boulder. Now, a lot of magic shops have tricks, etc., but Sam's was typical Sam, a really classy operation. It was nicely decorated. There were masks up on the wall over there. All of the famous posters were over there. It was just like a cool place to be. And I loved working there. I was one of the people who was an employee of the Wizard Magic Shop. So those are my memories. But what is it like to be a little 12-year-old kid back in 1974, dreaming about being a magician, walking into the Wizard Magic Shop? What is it like for someone like Joe Given, who is now in Castle Rock and is still a professional magician, excellent professional magician? Joe, what was that like for you?
Well, Eddie hit it right on the head when he talks about the magic shop. And I'll tell you about that to wrap this up. But so many people said so many things that rang so many bells with me. I, too, have known Sam for 46 to 47 years and consider him one of the best friends of my entire life. When somebody mentioned the sarcophagus, which we saw in one of the pictures earlier, I actually introduced him to that thing because Carol and I had discovered this store that was selling things at wholesale, and we went in there and asked Sam to join us. And we're looking around, and both of us are loving the sarcophagus. I went back a week later to get it for myself, and it was gone. Turns out that it was in Sam's house. He beat me to the punch. They never got another one back. So I thought that was fun. We always shared movies and horror stories and things like that in common. Always talked about that kind of thing. Movie memorabilia was another passion of mine, which brings up, I think, the way I would sum up Sam, which is the word passion. You know, he never followed anybody else's beat. He lived his life in passion. He decided he would follow his own beat and do what he wanted to do. And that's why he was able to have model trains built in Indiana or Illinois. And I was there when he was working on that project. And I was astonished at what he was able to do. And run a movie poster store along with magic shops, and run a movie theater at the Denver Center for Performing Arts, and be a movie critic for KBCO. Everything that spoke to him, he followed. And I think he gave me without me knowing it at the time as a 12-year-old, an example of kind of what I wanted to do with my life. So thank you, Sam, for inspiring me to follow my heart as well. Another thing I really wanted to say quickly about Sam is that as a close friend, he was an unbelievable listener. With a huge heart, he cared about other people. And if there was an issue you were going through, he was not judgmental. He had plenty of his own issues, and he was willing to share those experiences. And we went through years of different conversations based on issues that we both had in our lives, and he was always there for me. So I'll never forget him for that. Well, another thing that we shared in common was cooking. He gave me a huge cookbook that he personally assembled because he knew that I loved to cook, especially Mexican food. We always went to Mexican restaurants, and he shared that with me. Speaking of his pet tarantula, Sam gave me a gift one year, which was his dead pet tarantula. It was like a birthday gift all wrapped up in a nice box, and I opened it up, and there was this husk of a spider, and I still have it. But I won't touch it. So here's my take on this whole thing as far as the magic shop goes. I started performing magic when I was 4 years old. I started doing my very first paid shows when I was 7. I would get my magic from catalogs that my mom had stolen from me when I got them from Boys Life magazine, and she would order me stuff, and I would put together shows. The first magic store I entered in my life was the Wizard Magic Shop. I had no idea at the time what a special place it was compared to other magic stores, of which I've seen hundreds over the decades. And with Eddie, I am in total agreement. It is the best magic shop that I believe has ever existed. Not only did it reflect Sam's meticulous cleanliness, organization, and sense of good taste, but it was just a real magic shop. When you walked in, you felt like you were in a magical place. H.G. Wells wrote a story called The Magic Shop, and I always think of Sam's shop when I think of that story. So I spent all my income, my allowance, and anything I made doing magic shows going to the Wizard. That is how I became what I consider now a real magician, with Sam's influence, Eddie's influence, and the other people that worked there, Steve Aldrich and numerous others. All in the core of what good magic was about. When I turned 16 years old, I got my driver's license. And I didn't even drive around Greeley, Colorado, where I grew up. I immediately, once I got my license, I left the DMV and I got in the car and I drove straight to Boulder, an hour-long drive to go to the Wizard Magic Store. That's how much Sam's place meant to me. And Sam did as well. I remember when I was thrilled and honored that he let me into the back room, which I didn't know existed for years. But once he let me into the back room to see some of the larger illusions, he had a 6-foot-tall guillotine and the zigzag lady and these different things in the back room. I felt like I'd finally made it into the club as a professional. So Sam's encouragement helped keep me going through all of that. We spoke for years and years about being a magic rep together, something I want to do. Never happened, but he was a dreamer. I consider myself to be the same, and I consider the fact that he helped keep my dreams alive. So thank you, Eddie and Mike and George, for allowing me to share my little bit of the magic that Sam shared with me.
Oh, Joe Given, thank you so much. That's these different insights from the different little corners of Sam's world are just exactly what we needed today to represent who this guy was and still is to us all. There are other people in the audience who were very young and wandered into that shop, Elmer Armstrong, others who had some of the similar experiences and literally got kickstarted into the world of entertainment as the result of Sam Kent. Somewhere along the line, I got really fascinated with learning American Sign Language and even more enamored with my sign language teacher, a totally warm, genuine, real, wonderful soul. And as I said earlier, Laurel and I would go to the Boulder Theater and sit up in the balcony and watch these great classic movies that Sam would show at the Boulder Theater. And then she met Sam through all of that. And they then spent many years together on and off in their relationship in Knoxville and then commuting to be together. Laurel Goodrich has a unique perspective on our boy. I welcome her now from Tennessee.
Sam and I met and fell in love in the late 70s. We spent some years together, as Mike said, and some years apart for a period lasting more than 20 years. The relationship did end, but my admiration and affection for him endured. He was a deeply lovable man. And as you know, he was funny. One evening in 1997, we went to a movie. As we walked toward our car afterward, and I talked about my impressions, he casually pointed to a license plate on a parked car and said, "I've seen that before." I glanced and said, "Oh." And for a split second, I kept talking. Then I burst into laughter, stopped in my tracks, doubled over. It had taken me that split second to register the words on the license plate that he pointed to when he said, "I've seen that before." The license plate read, "Deja vu." He stood there, chuckling that understated signature Sam chuckle, while I regained my composure. That was Sam. When it came to humor, he was subtle, and his timing could be brilliant. Sam sometimes wondered whether his endeavors mattered in any important way. It was so clear to me that what he offered did have inherent value, that it was Hard to fathom how he could doubt his contribution and his worth, but I could see that he did. So I would talk about how performing and being truly funny as he was brings levity and light to things that seem too grave or dark to bear. It gives perspective and respite. It nourishes. I believe Sam knew in his heart that entertainment is life-giving. That's why he pursued it, even in the face of internal and societal pressure to follow some higher calling. Sam occasionally seemed to use film or theater to open a window for me onto his own psyche. I cherished those moments. In 1998, he bought us tickets to Barrymore, a one-man show rendered by Christopher Plummer, who performed as the legendary actor John Barrymore. Sam suggested I read the biography of Barrymore called Goodnight, Sweet Prince before seeing the play. The show and the book gave me a deep look into the life of Barrymore, an actor whose highs and lows, whose comic and tragic turns, both on and off the stage, had a personal resonance for Sam. It was so generous of Sam to offer me this vicarious glimpse into his own spirit. Sam was a gentle, uniquely creative soul. He died the way he lived, on his own terms. I miss him. We all miss him. Sam, thank you for all you gave us. Good night, sweet Prince.
Thank you, Laurel. That was very touching and a different perspective. So that was very nice. Thank you. Way back in the 1970s, Sam, along with 6 other of us, put together an act called the Phone Family Circus, F-O-A-N. There were 4 magicians, 2 jugglers, and a musician. And one of the signature pieces that we did is one that Sam and a few others came up with, and Sam performed, called the 12 Days of Magic. This was a brilliant routine. Sam started out with, on the first day of magic, the wizard gave to me a pocket finger guillotine, and the audience would sort of like wonder what this was all about. Then it was, on the second day of magic, 2 Chinese sticks and a pocket finger guillotine, and the audience in an instant understood the entire routine. They looked at all the magic props that were on the table, they got the pattern, and that is the sign of a brilliant routine, is when the audience gets it like that. And what made it even better is, even knowing what was going on, when Sam did it, he nailed it. He just hit it on the head. And so all of the living phones are here with us today. Kathy DeFrancis, who was our musician, passed away a few years ago, and of course Sam has not, but all of the others are with us. And so we're going to do a quick round robin to find out what your memories are of the Phone Family Circus and Sam's part of the 12 Days of Magic. I want to turn this over first to Steve Aldridge, who is in Bozeman, Montana. Steve, tell us what you remember of the days.
We created the 12 Days of Magic in the Wizard Magic Shop on Pearl Street right around closing time one night. It was Sam and Jim Halbert and I, and it must have been pretty close to Christmas time. And we were coming up with different lines to use in the song, and Jim Halbert kept singing, 5 blinking rings. And so we came up with all the different gags, and we were dissatisfied with the final thing for the partridge in a pear tree. And then finally Sam came up and he said, I've got it. It's going to be a pocket finger guillotine. And we all decided that was quite satisfactory. So I think that very night we packed up all the gear and we went down to the Mile High Magician Society meeting, and we did the routine. And of course it was a big hit. And then when we were invited to do the show at Abbott's Get Together, I argued strongly against including the routine in the show at all. I thought, well, Sure, our friends in Denver thought it was funny, but that's because they like us and they were being polite. But this just isn't sophisticated enough to be in a big national venue like that. But obviously, I was completely wrong because our group won the famous Senator Crandall Award for the funniest act at the Abbott's Get Together. And they especially noted the 12 Days of Magic as the piece that made them give us the award.
At the same show way back when, we have Brent Warren. Steve was one of the magicians. Brent is one of the magicians. Brent, what are your recollections of all that?
I'm thinking, oh, I remember. What I remember a lot was traveling with Sam to get to the different phone family events that we performed. One time was in his Volkswagen bus, but we took the 12 Days of Magic in the phone family. Sam and I took the train, one of the last trains with a Vista Dome on top. And I remember we just rode that the whole way to New York City to perform basically the phone family and the 12 Days of Magic. We had a layover in Chicago, whereas we went to the park that night and got to see Mitch Miller. Remember Mitch Miller? Of course you all do. But it was so much fun being on stage and watching Sam from behind as we sang the chorus, throwing all the props in the air here and there, and to try to maintain a character because you just wanted to crack up. In fact, we did crack up because he was so great at performing this routine. And that was so many memories. Sam, we miss you. And I just want to let everybody know they haven't mentioned that Sam has saved the world many times, because I personally know that he would go to his robot every single day and say, Gort Klatu Barada Nikto, thus saving the world. And I just think he should be rewarded for that alone. Thank you, Sam, for saving the world. And now I'd like to turn it over to Barrett Felker, who was our fabulous juggler, one of them.
Hey, everyone. Right up at the top of the show, George, Sam's brother, he talked about Sam's gift for one-liners and his willingness to help friends in need. One of the first shows I did with him was at was in Colon, Michigan, at the Abbott's Get Together. And, you know, I was young and I was a little bit apprehensive about going on the road anywhere at that point. And I said, you know, hey, Sam, is there anything you can tell me about Colon, Michigan? And Sam just said, he said, Barrett, just relax. There's one thing you need to know about Colon, Michigan, and that is that it's located just above Sphincter, Indiana.
All right, Barrett. As I was saying a second ago, there were 4 magicians, 2 jugglers, and a musician. Cheeseman Spark is the other juggler who was on the show. Cheeseman now lives in Amsterdam, Holland, and so we are coming all the way from Amsterdam to hear from him.
Hello, this is Cheeseman Spark, coming at you from the corner of Brede Rodestraat and Amstelveenseweg, but you knew that already. A few quick thoughts about Sam. Number 1, he was definitely the glue that held the Phone Family Circus together. The other 6 of us, we all had our own agendas. Sam didn't seem to ever have any agendas at all, which is one of the many things that made him so endearing. But luckily, I'm reminded of Sam constantly because every time I see somebody on the street that's wearing a turtleneck, Sam's face just immediately pops into my mind. And that's such a wonderful thing, considering that I basically had sporadic contact with Sam over the past decade or so. And I'm the only member of the Phone Family Circus that never participated in the 12 Days of Magic, something I'll regret for the rest of my life. I was usually setting up in front of the stage while you guys were setting up behind the curtain, and worse yet, sometimes I had to follow the 12 Days of Magic with one of those amazing juggling routines. So good to have this opportunity. Best of luck.
Thank you, Cheeseman. I want to say we are in for a treat because we found an old video of Sam doing the 12 Days of Magic. This comes from the 1979 Abbott's Get Together in Colon, Michigan. There were 1,000 magicians in the audience. And you are about to see a great show. Before we play that, I want to just give a call out to Joe Stevens, who is with us here today. Joe Stevens actually gave the Phone Family Circus its start in Wichita. So thank you, Joe. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't be able to have gone as far with the Phone Family Circus as we did. So, Michael, if you are ready to roll the 12 Days of Magic, that would be awesome.
Magic, the wizard gave to me a pocket finger guillotine. On the second day of magic, the wizard gave to me 2 Chinese sticks and a pocket finger guillotine. On the third day of magic, the wizard gave to me 3 rubber dolls, 2 Chinese sticks, and a pocket finger guillotine. On the 4th day of magic, the wizard gave to me 4 Spinelli decks, 3 rubber dogs, 2 Chinese sticks, and a pocket finger guillotine. On the 5th day of magic, the wizard gave to me 5 blinking rings, 3 rubber dogs, 2 Chinese sticks, and a pocket finger guillotine. On the 6th day of magic, the wizard gave to me 6 thumb tips, 5 blinking rings, 4 Spinelli decks, 3 rubber dogs, 2 Chinese sticks, and a pocket finger guillotine. On the 7th day of magic, the wizard gave to me 7 drooping flowers, 6 thumb tips, 5 blinking rings, 4 Spinelli decks, 3 rubber doves, 2 Chinese sticks, and a pocket finger guillotine. On the 8th day of magic, the wizard gave to me 8 chameleon silks, 7 drooping flowers, 6 thumb tips, 5 blinking rings, 4 Spinelli decks, 3 rubber doves, 2 Chinese sticks, and a pocket finger guillotine. On the 9th day of magic, the wizard gave to me 9 floating zombies, 8 chameleon silk, 7 drooping flowers, 6 thumb tips, 5 blinking rings, 4 Spinelli decks, 3 rubber doves, 2 Chinese sticks, and a pocket finger guillotine. Day of magic. top hats. 10 Joey ducks, 9 floating zombies, 8 chameleon silks, 7 drooping flowers, 6 thumb tips, 5 winking rings, 4 golly thanks, 3 rubber ducks, 2 Chinese things, and a hawk and finger guillotine. Day of magic the wizard gave to me, 12 appearing canes, 11 floating top hats, 10 Joey ducks, 9 floating zombies, 8 chameleon silks, 7 drooping flowers, 6 thumb tips, 5 blinking rings, 4 spinning gangs, 3 rubber guns, 2 Chinese things, and a pocket finger guillotine.
I have seen that routine many times, and I've got tears of laughter. Yay, Sam! All right, Sam. It was awesome. All right, Sam. He was fabulous. We are going to now shift gears and do a group photo. Pour yourself your champagne, which I've been waiting to taste for quite a long time. And as soon as everybody has that, pour a little bit more, okay? What I'm going to ask you to do is hold it up, look at the camera, not at the screen. Let's turn it over to Louise Kent.
I have to begin by saying this event with the champagne gifts from Sam would not have been possible without the efforts of Larry Crowley, Karen Carpenter, Emma Langdon, and Star Goldstein. Special recognition must be given to Michael Eisner and Eddie Goldstein because they're the ones who produced this event today and pulled it all together for us. And now for the toast. Walt Disney knew that inside every grown-up is a child longing to dream freely again. He said every child is born blessed with a vivid imagination. But just as a muscle grows flabby with disuse, so the bright imagination of a child pales in later years if he ceases to exercise it. Well, Sam exercised it all the time, and it was infectious. He found enjoyment in life and in the people around him. Sam was playful, caring, young in spirit, creative, curious, extremely bright and clever, and really just plain fun to be around. I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say I enjoyed the interesting places we went, the people we met, and the conversations and experiences we had with Sam, because they were always filled with magic.
Salute.
To
Cheers,
Sam,
everybody.
with
Cheers.
all our love.
Salute. And as you have a sip, then look at those two on the screen right there, the guy with the jaw and mouth that just is all Kent, and his lovely Louise. And it's been so wonderful for Eddie and I to spend our time through this process with those two, having done what they did to help make this work. Not only distributing champagne, but honoring Sam in the way that they did. And Louise working so hard to make sure that every one of us had what we needed to have in order to be able to arrive here today for this bizarre electronic, telephonic, weirdo way to meet. And in a way, we were going to have this in Boulder, Colorado, and how many would be here? 100 maybe locally that could make it. But this gave an opportunity for people as far away as Amsterdam and Bozeman, Montana, to really be with us and enjoy this day in the name of Sam and show these videos to everyone. I think it worked out magnificently And thank you, George and Louise. And a special thanks to Eddie Goldstein for all of his tremendous efforts and just the person that he is. It's been awesome working with you on this project. Also acknowledging Marianne Martin for those wonderful photographs of Sam from my birthday holding the Beatles microphone. And they're just so beautiful. It was the ones that we used on the invitations that Louise and George put together. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. Sam. Oh, Eddie. You're my Sam for today.
Thank you, Michael. That was very nice. This, by the way, thank you, George and Louise. This is delicious champagne, almost as good as Manischewitz wine. Almost. I want to thank all of you for being part of this. And most of all, I would like to thank my friend, our friend, Sam Kent, not only for 47 years of wonderful friendship, but even today, thank you, Sam, for bringing us all together.
And our tech person, Mr. Goldstein, Star Goldstein, who just did such a magnificent job today. Louise and George spent a lot of time assembling essentially a core sample of Sam Kent's life that you're about to experience in photographs. Please enjoy this. Thanks for joining us here today.
The clown with his pants falling down, or the dance that's a dream of romance, or the scene where the villain is mean, that's entertainment. The lights on the lady in tights, or the bride with the guy on the side, or the ball where she gives him her all, that's entertainment. The plot can be hot, simply teeming with sex, a gay divorcee who is after her ex. It can be Oedipus Rex, where a chap kills his father and causes a lot of bother. The clerk who is thrown out of work by the boss, who is thrown for a loss by the skirt, who is doing him dirt. The world is the stage is a world of entertainment.
You're the queen in my coffee. You're the salt in my stew. You will always be my necessity. I'll be lost without you. You're the starch in my collar. You're the lace in my shoe. You will always be my necessity. I'll be lost without you. Most men tell love tales, and each tale dovetails, you know, each known way. But this is my own way. You're the sail in my love boat. You're the captain and crew. You will always be my necessity. I'll be lost without you.
baby, can't go wrong, 'cause I'm in right. It's for sure, not for maybe, that I'm all dressed up tonight. Stepping out with my honey, can't be bad, feels so good. Never felt quite so sunny, and I keep on knocking wood. There'll be smooth sailing, 'cause I'm trimming my sails with my top hat and my white tie and my tails. Stepping out with my baby, can't go wrong, 'cause I'm in right. Ask me when will that day be? The big day may be tonight. Dancing and singing in the rain.
Welcome you with open arms.
Is that so? How late do you stay open?
This lady is my wife. You should be ashamed.
If this lady is your wife, you should be ashamed.
So, you didn't think I was a real detective, eh?
If you're a detective, I'm a monkey's uncle.
Keep your family out of this. What are you doing with that cigar in your mouth?
Why, do you know another way to smoke it? Faravelli, you've got the brain of a 4-year-old boy, and I bet he was glad to get rid of it. Is that so? Where are you going?
Uruguay.
Well, you go Uruguay, and I'll go mine. Well, all the jokes can't be good. You've got to expect that once in a while.
When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. Anything your heart desires will come to you. If your heart is in your dream, no request is too extreme. When you wish upon a star, as dreamers do.
Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow,